Welcome to the Imagine What's Possible podcast. In each episode of Imagine What's Possible, we talk to experts here at Flint Hill who share their navigation charts and shine a light on how critical skills are forged and sustained day by day and what you can do to support them. Our goal is to offer practical insights on what you can be doing right now to actively support your child's academic educational journey. I'm your host, Christine Dwyer, and my 24 years in education began in classical languages, trying to make Latin accessible to sixth grade learners. And then I shifted to a more traditional homeroom setting, and I've spent the last 9 years as the language arts department chair, where I work on literacy and curriculum for students junior kindergarten through sixth grade. Yet it still does surprise me sometimes how some of that early experience in Latin continues to impact how I think about literacy and English language arts at all levels. Today, we're going to focus on something that you may have heard about in the somewhat recent-ish news called the science of reading. And while this concept has been talked about lately, it's not new, and that's something that Michele and I will discuss. It's not a new way of thinking. It's not new knowledge about how reading works. We do want to share a bit about how the science of reading is implemented and in the classroom to support literacy, specifically today with our earliest learners. Joining us is Michele Scadron, a kindergarten teacher here at Flint Hill School with more than 35 years of classroom experience spanning kindergarten, first, and second grade. We've calculated that she's taught hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 young learners during their earliest school years. And then throughout that time, that 35 years, she has seen a shift in the way that we are teaching reading and the way that we are supporting students. And specifically, we want to talk today about how students are benefiting from the way that we are teaching reading and literacy in the classroom. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Well, it is new to me over the past several years, and it was not something that I easily adjusted to because it was new approach. But as we've talked about, it is not new, but it is important because it is a scientific approach to looking at all the parts of reading broken down into small bits. And you and I have talked about the idea of it being a full body workout, that we look at it for the upper body and we look at it for the lower body. And that part of reading, you look at the upper body, you're doing the thinking part of it. You're doing the enrichment of the vocabulary and the different genres of reading and print concepts, as well as just building background knowledge for children. And then the lower body is more of what we see, especially in the primary and lower grades, where they are looking at the sounds and putting those together, looking at the sounds and how they match with letters, looking at the different phonics approach pieces where you're looking at the segments of words, how things work together to make words, and then looking at words that don't follow those routines and patterns, and we call those words heart words or sight words. So that's kind of where we start.
Right. So in this whole course, it's 35 years, and being part of seeing the shift, even though it's not new.
Right.
What have you seen, if anything, gains that students have had in the classroom with this different approach?
I think probably the biggest is that the pictures are important, but you can't look at the pictures and determine what the print says on the page, that there is a lot more behind that 3 cueing system that we've referred to in the past, where you're looking at the beginning of a word and looking at the picture and hoping you can figure it out very intuitively. There's much more behind that. So students are being able to, at a very young age, start to be exposed to the sounds that letters make and see how they work together to make words. And then being able to take those sounds and maybe look at, for example, the word cat and how it begins with a k. And then you've got the end part of that word. So it's k, at. And then eventually getting the multiple sounds that make up a word, then you're looking at k, at, made of 3 sounds. So kids are learning at a very young age that they can use those pieces to make sense of the letters and the words on a page. And that communication is made of words and that there are spaces between them. And that there's the idea of there are words they're going to have to just know. They're going to have to memorize because they don't follow these so-called rules and system. And then just the idea that they're becoming more independent once they become more confident in these pieces, to be able to take what they know and look at decodable books that are at that level that they can more independently do and enjoy the pictures.
Yeah.
But with the idea that they know what the message is on the page.
Great. So, this is, literacy has the two parts. It's got the decoding when the text is on the page and you're at, and you're putting the sign, sound, symbol correspondences together.
Right.
And then there's the other piece where you're encoding and putting it on the page. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what that looks like, spelling lists. Like, do we still do them? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so spelling lists have certainly evolved over time. I'm sure that there are people in our audience that remember spelling lists that would go out on a Monday and you'd memorize words, and Friday you'd know them for the test and then promptly forget them. And we're now spelling, especially at the primary grade age, you may look at families of words. So, cat, hat, mat, sat. But you're looking at them and seeing the connections that they have and how you can use that sound knowledge and apply them to other words. Spelling lists probably still have their day in the upper grades. But down in the lower grades, you're more looking at, do I know the sound? Do I know the letter that makes the sound? Do I know how to put them together? And that encoding piece I've seen comes very much hand in hand. As you're building a reader, you're also then building a writer. So the more that a child becomes comfortable with the letters and the sounds in reading form, then they are also then able to take that knowledge into the encoding or writing piece. And that's why those two parts are so important to work together.
So when you are in the early years, knowing encoding, we'll talk a little bit later, maybe about other ways to practice that in the kindergarten classroom. But what are some other ways to encourage writing and communication as well in your early learners?
Well, it is, I've found that it just, as long as you're offering them the opportunities for that writing piece, they really do become ready. And it may start with just drawing a picture. It may start with telling a story out loud and then drawing something and being able to talk about what that is. And from that point, it might be starting to put initial sounds and not having a whole word, just capital letters, strings of letters. And then they start to evolve once that child starts to learn the sounds. And then that the sounds they go together to make an actual word, then that comes too. But that handwriting piece is a part of it. There's so many complicated factors that evolve and become part of how a child goes from a listener to a storyteller to a reader to a writer themselves. So it's an ongoing process, I guess you'd say, that we work on from day one.
And so as I heard you said, you work on those simple, the consonant, vowel, consonant, spelling patterns in kindergarten and reading patterns very deliberately. I can imagine a world where children have these great stories and they want to spell words like dragon and princess and all that kind of stuff. And they might not have those skills yet.
Right.
What do you do as a teacher?
Well, and it's interesting because, again, there is a process for that at the beginning, they want to write what they want to write. And if it's not cat, or they aren't satisfied with just k to stand for cat, at the beginning, the teachers, I think, take that time to sound that word to the child. So if they're going to write, for example, the word animal, we'll listen to and then they'll probably wait for the next sound. And so I, as the adult, will help break down that word into meaningful, manageable chunks. And then as they get a little more practice under their belt, then we would get to a place where they could, you would have them say the word. Okay, what's the beginning sound in that word? And then they may say and then you say, okay, what's the next sound? And then so you're kind of training them to listen for those parts themselves, and then be able to take what they're hearing and put it together on paper. It's an amazing kind of magical.
Didn't you say something about license plates?
Oh, yeah. I said that as
talking,
a primary teacher, we are the best readers of license plates,
right?
Because they take all the vowels out, and we figure, oh, look what that one says. Yeah, we're pretty good at that.
So in this world too, we value accuracy, right? So. Should teachers, should parents, if they're not spelling it accurately, should we be correcting them?
My answer is no. No.
Say more.
No. I mean, they will get there eventually. And I think at the beginning, it's important that they have that meaningful struggle. Because if they're meaningfully struggling through how to put that word together, it will be more important to them, when they get to it. And then there eventually becomes a point when they do have a better command of the sounds and a better command of how to put words together. And then all of a sudden they'll look at you and they'll ask you how to spell something that does not follow any rule whatsoever. Right. And that might be a time when, I will spell the word show for you. Okay. Because,
show?
That's an example. An example. That came into my head of, okay, they should get the digraph of sh, but the O.
Yes.
And then they get to the point where they do want to start spelling things correctly. But I would really encourage people to not give them those words at the beginning, because then they're going to always want to come to you for those words. You want them to be able to feel confident in the ability to try. Right. And then I think I said to you as well that if sometimes there are times when the child will write something and I can read because I sat there with them as they wrote it, but I will very promptly turn the paper over and I will write on the back what it says so that I can remember later, even though I knew it in the moment, that I knew that message that they were trying to say, but I might forget it later. Yeah. So, but then that's fair too, right? And that's fair too, because then there is a message. They did get it on paper the way that it does make sense in that moment. But it's always okay to. I don't like to put it. I don't like to correct it right there on their paper with their writing. Personally, because I then feel like, okay, they get the message then that what I did was not correct.
Right.
Or nobody could read what I wrote. So if it's something that you as the adult need to remember, I just make a little Post-it note or put something on the back to refer to later.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Your classroom, I've been there. I know it's a literacy rich environment. Yeah. Can you describe the things that you do to make it so that it's a place where children are excited to learn to read and write, where they're practicing those skills? Just describe what your classroom is like.
So I think one of the mainstays that children really love is the alphabet on the wall, because it's something that is a dynamic, used alphabet. So they will be sitting there writing with you and they will turn their head and they will look up and say, oh, how do you make a B? It's an actual functioning alphabet on the wall. A library rich in books that are, decodable, which we'll talk more about, what we would maybe call really easy books, as well as books that are not as easy, but are very enriching and interesting. So, having a variety of books at different levels in the classroom. But I'd have to say we do have the months of the year. They love to go to that and look at, what the months are and what the days of the week. All of those things, I think, go towards a rich environment of literature, labeling things in the room. But I would have to say the thing that is the biggest is the morning message. And so the morning message is up daily, and it is nearly the same. Even here we are at day 170 something of school, and it's still almost the same message that we had since day one, which is the date, dear students, today is, we will have. And it's that way intentionally because from the first day, they learn that this is the system, this is the routine, this is the structure. And at the beginning, it's something that is read to them for those who are not able to read them. For those who can read, they know what to expect still. But as it becomes a real important instructional tool, because it shows capital letters and when to use them. It shows, we talk about spaghetti spaces, which are the little thin lines that go in between one word, in the word, like between letters, and then the bigger, like meatball spaces that are a little bit bigger finger spaces in between the words. So they learn all of these things as each day goes. Yep. And it's amazing to see them come in and all of a sudden they are the ones pointing to the words and reading it. Or maybe they're writing their own message later as they have used this. every day. So that to me is one of my favorite, because we mark things up and we use it to teach, as well as just, I think it's a level of comfort. They know what to expect and what's going to be. And if I make a mistake, they'll let me know.
I'm sure.
Because that's how that goes too. And we want that. We want that. We want them to be that comfortable, and we want them to be that knowledgeable of, why did you cross that out?
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
So that would be my favorite, I think, piece of literacy rich in a kindergarten classroom.
Yeah. I love what you say about the mistakes. I always, sometimes we get, even on the older levels, about, you say, hug your mistakes, and you don't always cross them out.
Right.
Sometimes you hug your mistake and you remember it and you learn from it.
Perfect.
So I think that's great.
Absolutely.
So you have a curated space in your kindergarten land, right? Not everybody in home is going to,
True.
What are some suggestions that you would have for families and caregivers to continue that literacy-rich experience outside the classroom?
Yeah, it's funny, as I'm sitting here thinking, I've even done like a message when I've worked with students one-on-one in a home setting, where I write my own message to them that's very similar. That then,
that's a great idea.
But it's, again, you have to kind of be, and this is something I learned as I learned more about using the science of reading in a primary classroom, is being very selective in the words you use so that they can practice their skills. If you're putting words in a message, you want to put in words that they either are sight words, heart words that they will continue to know, or if you're putting a word that's going to be something that they cannot, get a grasp on with the sounds they have, it's important to think that through. But so in a home setting, I would still consider magnet tile or magnet letters to be an awesome thing to use. And I'm sure that there's a lot of different ways to use them. Like, sometimes I think now that they even have them with heart words and sight words, but then just the individual letters are good for building words as well as practicing sounds. Being kinesthetic and using that whole body approach of tracing letters in sand, or in the bathroom mirror when it's all steamed up, or whatever you might have, shaving cream, all of those things helps kind of cement it into their body. And just lots of reading to your children, and really reading to them a book with pages that you're actually sitting side by side, not just listening to somebody else far away have a recorded story for them. But on the go, I think that reading piece of driving in the car and you're looking at all the signs, and they're able to point out all of those places that you like to go. They can see, the Target and the Chick-fil-A, all of those places is still a good way for them to start to see words driving down the street or in town. But in the car also, the same way you might practice numbers or math, there's also the time and the place to practice sounds. You could talk about, what is the beginning sound in this word that I'm going to say to you? And maybe it's, I keep saying cat, but whatever it may be, maybe it's ball. What is the beginning sound that you hear? And talk about that, because it gives them another place and a time to talk and practice those sounds. And then even practicing sounding those CBC words or bigger words. Rhyming games. Rhyme is a very important piece to growing as a reader and writer. And singing songs that have rhyme and rhythm, and those things do, I think, impact. I get more attention from kids when I sing. I'm not the greatest singer, but they do stop and listen. They do stop and listen. It's kind of, it's very interesting. They do stop and listen when I sing to them. And then just the importance of building their background knowledge. Yeah. Because if we're, again, looking at that whole body reader and writer, we want to make sure that they have an understanding of lots of things that who knows when they'll have to know about the Odyssey. But if you talk to them about them, eventually when they're reading a book, so the more you talk to your child, the more that you help build that background information for them, it will certainly help them as a reader and writer.
I've heard a lot of times, and I actually experience it with my own children, about you with yours, but that when you discover that they are emerging readers, and when they start reading signs that you're going through when you're passing in a car, and you're like, oh my gosh, you can read.
They're reading.
Like, it feels like magic.
It really does. Sudden. It really does.
And I also know, I was hoping you could speak a little bit about, everybody's on their own. For sometimes that magic is at 5, for sometimes it's at 6, so what, can you talk to us a little bit about, when a child is taking more time to develop these skills? What are some strategies that families might take to support?
And it's just knowing that it does take time. knowing that not everyone is going to get to that magic place at the same time if you have an older child or if you have a neighbor and you're comparing notes. It's everyone's at a different part of the continuum, and everyone will be a reader. It's just a matter of their journey to be a reader. And if you're seeing some real struggle at home, I'd say number one, try not to make it a struggle.
Yes.
Easier said than done, I know, but make it fun. Make it more like you're reading to them, that you're playing letter games, things that hopefully will be less stressful, less high stakes, low stakes. You want to keep them there at home. Let the teachers do the heavy lift. And if you're finding that there are struggles at home, definitely communicate with your teacher, your child's teacher, and see what they can suggest. Like, what are they seeing in the classroom that might be good for you to practice? That, again, I would rather have a family at home practicing things that are easy peasy, lemon squeezy, than feeling like you are carrying the whole load. Right. So knowing that it is a process and knowing that it's a team, and let that teacher know that how can we work more easily at home. Right.
And I think just at various levels in the early years, mid years, and even later years, there's so much that goes into reading and writing. And sometimes it's about pinpointing. Is it the phonemic awareness? Is it the letters? Is it the vocabulary and comprehension, and being able to then target that a little bit more?
Right. And it's all those pieces that you take for granted when all of a sudden you're in fourth grade and they're reading.
Right.
You know, it's when you are at those young junior kindergarten, first grade levels, and you're really trying to still have the child become comfortable with all the parts. And as a parent, it's frustrating. But to take that frustration out, let the teacher know and have them help you pinpoint what can you do at home that would be good practice, that would support.
So then on the other end, we have some who are really quick. They're very quickly picking this up. What, if anything, can they benefit from by doing those CVC patterns if they are able to decode those?
Right. And that's something I think every year is different. But, you know, when you have students who really do come in with a command of reading and writing and being a very confident reader, I do think that still having everyone on the same page as students of knowing how this system is going to work, and that giving everyone the same opportunity to learn at the same time, even if you already know it, it's one of those. So you as a teacher, your job is to make it fun and have everyone feel included and not like, oh, they already know all of this. It's still, it's one of these where you don't want to necessarily take them into first, second, third. You don't want to take them farther into another grade level. It's keeping them kind of within where they are, maybe offering them other books that are ones they can read, or maybe have them write about books that they're reading, or have them writing their own books. There's just so many things. I have students reading to students. There's just a lot of ways to have them still feel successful, not my least favorite word, which is bored, because it's one of those that you just offer them the right. We talk a lot about just right. Everybody gets what they need, and that's the goal that the teacher, I hope, has in mind.
Right, and I think too something to keep in mind is sometimes the decoding is simpler than the automatic encoding, and when they're writing, like you're saying, when they're writing, being very automatic in their spelling patterns, and then working on their spacing, or working on the vocabulary, or just going to another part of that upper body.
Right, and it just requires the teacher to be really honed in on where their strengths are, their greatest strengths, and where you can boost some of the other parts that would keep them engaged and yet keep them challenged and growing where they are, rather than just where everybody is.
Right. Yeah. So knowing the goal is reading and writing, you know, and one of the things, one of my favorite statistics, there's research behind that, there's 15 minutes a day of reading.
I love that stat.
Every day, and how it pays dividends with a child's overall academic literacy with their growth. My question would be, what does that 15 minutes a day look like? And we'll end the segment with talking about our summer reading program and things like that, or not program, but summer reading opportunities.
Yes, exactly.
But what can reading look like?
So many different things. It's certainly one of the things I mentioned before is decodables. And decodables I will have to say, even though science of reading is not new, I think that there have been a lot of writers, authors, companies who have really bought into and taken ownership of the idea of putting out decodables for young readers. And when I say decodable, it's really focusing on what would look like really easy, boring text if you're a fourth grader.
Right.
But if you're a kindergartner or someone learning to read, the seed is, I have to get a CVC word, the seed is big.
Right.
So having words, even seed would not be an easy one.
Right.
So the cat is big would be more of an example of all words that a child should, as a new reader, begin to know by the end of kindergarten, for example. So I think that that's where you start, is that you have books that are successful, confident reads for where that child is as a reader. And then and as you go along the path, you'll be learning more of the rules, so to speak, that go with the science of reading. So in first grade, there's another whole set of this journey, and so on and so forth. But then also it could be that you're reading to them and you're reading books that are favorites that they've heard over and over. I call books friends. You can go back to them and visit them and over and over and over, to the point where that child is now, that same magic of like seeing them read signs. All of a sudden they're reading that book. They've heard it so many times. They know it. They love it. So we talk about being a reader who can retell stories that they've heard, being a reader who can retell based on the pictures, or being a reader who actually can read the words on the page. But then there's the beauty of being read to. And as I think you said, you can be read to forever until you're, don't want to be read to no more.
Yeah. I had a student back in the day whose older sister, she was in high school and very successful. So, and she was still read to every night. And I was like, that is beautiful.
It is. And there's something to be said to set that model for your child. Right. I think sometimes that is the difference, I think, between that early primary and all of a sudden third grade, where the comprehension piece really becomes much more expected, because by the time they've gone through junior kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they have gotten all of the pieces. I like to think about packing a bag. All the pieces are in their bag, and now they've got their bag and they can open it, and now they start to understand, but they won't understand unless they have been read to by their teachers, by their parents, by their family at home. Because that's where that background knowledge piece is. So the more that they hear stories, and the more that they develop their language and their vocabulary, and all of those pieces will help them grow as that reader. So that 15 minutes, it flies for that reading time. And just to double down on what you were saying about the decodables, like they might appear boring, but to be confident and independent is not boring. It's amazing to watch
for the
them
child.
Read a decodable. You look at those Bob books, and not to put a plug in for them, but you look at that as an example, and you think, oh my gosh. But then when you are watching a child actually be able to, they'll get to a word for us in the classroom, and they might not know the word, but you can give them the symbol of like, this means you have the sounds. Right. And then they get that word. Right. And that confidence is right there.
The one I also think about, I always like to share with families the ones, and again, not to put a plug in for anyone or whatever else, but the ones where they're familiar stories of cartoon characters and things like that. And they look very simple, and they are deceptively challenging. So there's a lot of patterns in there that the child might not know. Right. And that's another great one for families and caregivers to read alongside a child, and not be surprised if they don't know how to decode all those words.
And then that's a whole nother, we could have a whole nother podcast on the idea of reading different genres, because that makes me think of graphic novels.
Yes.
And there's a whole learning curve behind how to read something that looks like a comic book.
Right.
Because
sign us up for that.
Yes, let's do it.
So did want to wrap up today's episode. And with summer just around the corner, I wanted to encourage all Flint Hill listeners to explore our summer learning document on our posted on Husky Hub. It will be, it's not yet, but it will, or it might be in June.
By the time you watch this.
Yeah, by the time you listen, which includes links to reading challenges and recommended book lists. Then for our youngest Huskies, we also have a resource that reinforces some of the strategies that Michele shared today, supporting early literacy development at home. And I finally wanted to say, Michele, thank you so much for joining the conversation today and for being such a champion for literacy in the early years. I cannot overstate the importance of the work that you are JK, K, first, second, in that foundational piece, how challenging it is, how important it is, and how it's setting our students off for their academic journey and success. So it is an important work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.